You ever have one of those mornings where you walk into your workshop, expecting to start the day with a little creativity, a little calm, and then, bam, you're hit with absolute chaos? That was me, stepping into my shop, coffee in hand, only to find puddles forming under my feet, machines soaked, plans floating in a layer of water, and a sinking feeling in my stomach that told me immediately, this is not a leak. This is deliberate. My workshop, the place I've built and crafted and cared for, is flooding. And as I look around, my first thought isn't even rational. It's just a furious, incredulous, who the hell did this? And then I remember the HOA letter I received last week, the one I had tucked away, thinking it was just bureaucratic nonsense. Apparently, someone wasn't happy with the way I was using the land near the workshop, and they decided to teach me a lesson. Flooding, it turns out, is how they do that in their world. And as I stare at my soggy blueprints and the slowly rising water, I realize something. This is HOA Karen at her finest, the queen of control, the ruler of the neighborhood, convinced that she has the moral high ground to dictate everything from landscaping to workshop placement. And now she's turned my personal sanctuary into a swamp. I pace the floor, dripping wet shoes squeaking on the water-soaked floor, thinking through options. Call them, argue, appeal, complain to the board? Sure, but that feels like giving them exactly what they want. Compliance, obedience, submission. And if there's one thing I've learned about HOA Karen, it's that she thrives on control. She wants me frustrated, defeated, maybe even humiliated. And suddenly, a thought hits me, a spark that makes my pulse quicken. What if I flipped the script? What if the next move wasn't about getting mad? It was about responding in a way that she would never expect. I look around the workshop, the puddles reflecting sunlight, the tools, the wet plans, and I start planning. Not in a panicked, emotional way, but strategically. The workshop is my domain, yes, but the HOA has a prized possession too, their golf course. Green, pristine, well-maintained, and utterly dependent on irrigation and drainage. And as the mental gears start turning, a grin spreads across my face. If they think flooding me is fair, I think, let's see how they like a little swampy surprise on their side. The absurdity hits me fully then, the irony, the humor, the cinematic quality of it. Here's HOA Karen, thinking she's demonstrating ultimate authority by flooding a single workshop, probably imagining the distress. And meanwhile, I'm plotting a subtle, clever, completely nonviolent, but highly satisfying retaliation. I pace the workshop, my soaked shoes leaving marks on the floor, visualizing the plan. How do I make it undeniable, impactful, and yet entirely within reason? I don't want to break laws. I just want to show cause and effect, creativity over bureaucracy. And the neighbors are peeking now. I can see them from the windows across the street, some whispering, some shaking their heads, some already imagining the story that will circulate over fence lines and porches. It's funny, surreal, and oddly satisfying. The tension, the drama, the ridiculousness, it's the perfect setup for a story worth telling. And I know this is going to be memorable, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever dealt with overbearing HOA rules. I spend the next few minutes carefully surveying the situation. The water is rising, but it's still manageable. Tools are moved, plans salvaged, and I start imagining the next steps. There's a rhythm to it, a strategic calm, and for the first time since stepping into the workshop, I feel in control again. Not by obeying or complaining, but by planning my move. And in my mind, I start narrating the story like a movie unfolding. Step 1, recover. Step 2, strategize. Step 3, let HOA Karen see the consequences of her own actions. By mid-morning, the plan crystallizes. I'll use the natural flow of water, some clever redirection, and a bit of earth moving to ensure that the HOA's perfectly manicured golf course experiences a temporary, harmless, swampy inconvenience. It's not malicious. It's not illegal. It's poetic. And it's exactly the kind of creative, satisfying, suburban revenge that makes life worth telling stories about. As I stand there, looking at the flooded workshop, dripping water on the floor, I realize that the drama is only beginning. The workshop is just the first act. The HOA thinks they've won. They've inflicted chaos, frustration, and inconvenience, but they haven't yet encountered the ingenuity, patience, and humor of someone pushed too far. And in that realization, I feel a strange mixture of anticipation, glee, and calm determination. So that's where part 1 ends. The calm before the storm, the absurdity of the HOA's actions, and the spark of creative revenge. The flood is under control, the workshop will survive, and the plan to transform their pristine golf course into a swamp is taking shape in my mind. 30 minutes? A few hours? Doesn't matter. The scene is set. The tension is palpable. And HOA Karen has no idea what's coming next. By mid-morning, I've got my plan fully mapped out. The flooded workshop is still manageable, but my mind is on HOA Karen and her pristine golf course. I walk outside, boots crunching on wet gravel, and I picture it. The perfectly green fairways, the carefully maintained sand traps, the little flags waving in the breeze. All of it so meticulously kept, and all about to meet a little swampy chaos. I start with small steps, testing water flow and softening certain low-lying areas near the golf course. I redirect runoff from my workshop's drainage system, letting gravity do the work while keeping everything within reason. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just guiding water strategically. And the moment I see a small patch of fairway darken and start to soften, I can't help but grin. It's absurd, poetic, and entirely satisfying. HOA Karen notices almost immediately. She's pacing near the edge of her property, binoculars in hand, likely thinking she's spotting some minor maintenance issue. But as she scans the fairway, she stops, squints, and her jaw drops just a little. Her perfectly manicured green is starting to resemble, well, a swamp. And for a second, she looks completely lost, as if she cannot process what she's seeing. I take my time, moving carefully, adjusting flow, and letting the water spread gradually across the course. It's methodical, precise, and quiet. There's a sense of tension that's almost cinematic, the calm before her storm. Neighbors are peeking from windows, whispering, some filming, some chuckling. And I narrate quietly to my phone, half to myself, half for posterity. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when ego meets consequence in a suburban paradise. HOA Karen approaches, walking faster now, muttering under her breath about unauthorized flooding, property damage, and rules violation. Her gestures are frantic, her frustration mounting, but I remain calm, observing the results of my plan. She tries to stomp toward the softening ground, thinking she can somehow contain the situation, but the water moves faster than she expects. And the absurdity of it hits me. Here she is, used to controlling everything, now confronted with a swamp slowly overtaking her precious golf course. I pause occasionally, letting the water flow, stepping back to watch. The neighbors' reactions are priceless. Some are laughing quietly, some whispering encouragement, a few shaking their heads in disbelief. HOA Karen's panic is growing, and for a moment, she just stands there, hands on hips, blinking like she's trying to comprehend a phenomenon that defies her control. And that's when the humor, the satisfaction, and the drama all converge. As the water spreads across a wider area, I can see her starting to calculate, trying to figure out how to stop it, what remedies exist, but I've thought ahead. Every drainage path, every slope, every natural contour has been accounted for. And I remain outside, calmly watching, narrating quietly. Sometimes, control is an illusion. And sometimes, water just knows its path. HOA Karen finally raises her voice, calling for staff, yelling over the fence, insisting on immediate intervention. But it's too late. The swamp is forming, spreading, and the strategic chaos is undeniable. The fairways are softening, puddles forming, sand traps soggy. Her pristine golf course is temporarily neutralized, and the point is made without harming anyone. And as she realizes that her control is slipping, her frustration is palpable, yet there's nothing she can do instantly. Neighbors begin to gather at a distance, some discreetly, some openly, watching the spectacle. A few are taking photos, whispering to each other about the cleverness, the audacity, the sheer ridiculousness of it all. And I take a moment to appreciate the theater, the absurdity of a flooded workshop leading to a swamped golf course, the humor, the subtle satisfaction of clever revenge executed without malice, but perfectly effective. I step closer to the edge of the affected fairway, surveying the results. HOA Karen tries to approach, waving arms, yelling instructions to anyone around, but the water and mud slow her down. Her perfectly controlled world has become chaotic in the most ironic way possible. I stand there, soaking wet boots on soft earth, taking notes mentally for the story I will later tell on YouTube. Here is a lesson in creativity, patience, and poetic justice. And the tension peaks when she finally realizes that she cannot stop the spread immediately. Her staff is scrambling, neighbors are observing, and she is forced to pause, reassess, and admit, even if only internally, that her previous authority has limits. And I feel a quiet satisfaction, not from cruelty, but from seeing balance restored. Ego has been checked, boundaries have been reinforced, and the absurdity is undeniable. One flooded workshop has led to a swamp on a golf course, and everyone watching knows the irony. As the morning wears on, the flood continues gently, and HOA Karen finally retreats to her porch, muttering to herself, still calculating, still frustrated, still powerless in that moment. And I watch, reflecting on what just happened, a conflict resolved not through anger, not through formal complaints, but through creativity, patience, and strategic thinking. The water has spoken. I take a slow breath, surveying both the workshop and the golf course. The water is calm now, the swamp forming exactly where I intended, harmless yet unmistakable in its presence. The neighbors are discreetly applauding, whispering, some filming for posterity, some just chuckling at the audacity. And I realize that this story isn't about destruction. It's about the satisfaction of cleverness, the quiet triumph of someone who refuses to be bullied, and the subtle humor in everyday suburban absurdity. By mid-afternoon, HOA Karen is pacing again, assessing the damage, calling staff, muttering rules and regulations, and I know this moment will be remembered. The story is unfolding in real time, and I can almost hear the whispers spreading down the block. Did you see that? He flooded the golf course in response. What a genius. Finally, someone showed HOA Karen, and I realized that my act, though small in scale, has become legend in the microcosm of the neighborhood. And as I stand there, dripping from the morning exertion, boots squelching, surveying my workshop and their swamp, I can't help but reflect. This is what clever retaliation looks like. It's measured, precise, effective, humorous, and above all, satisfying. Not cruel, not destructive beyond reason, but undeniable in its impact. And HOA Karen, for all her rules and power, has learned a subtle lesson. Even in a carefully controlled suburban world, human ingenuity has a voice. That's where part 2 ends, the swamp fully forming. HOA Karen panicked, neighbors amused, and the drama at its peak. The final act, part 3, will focus on aftermath, reflection, and lingering consequences, with a call to action for audience engagement. By the afternoon, the swampy sections of the golf course are fully established, harmless but unmistakably messy, with soft, muddy puddles stretching across areas that were once perfectly groomed. HOA Karen is still pacing her porch, muttering and gesturing wildly, clearly trying to calculate how to regain control. But the reality is undeniable. Her pristine golf course is temporarily out of commission, and nothing she says or does changes that. I walk along the edge of the affected area, boots squelching in the mud, surveying the results. There's a strange, almost cinematic satisfaction in this quiet triumph. The workshop is no longer the focus of anger. HOA Karen's own domain has become the stage for poetic justice. And as I watch her pacing, flustered and muttering about rules and regulations, I can feel a calm sense of balance returning. Ego has met consequence, control has limits, and humor has sneaked into the drama. Neighbors begin to venture outside, some peeking from windows, some stepping cautiously onto the sidewalk to witness the spectacle. A few are filming discreetly, whispering, pointing, and chuckling. One neighbor murmurs. Finally, someone taught HOA Karen a lesson. Another shakes their head, laughing softly at the absurdity. The tension of the morning has settled into quiet awe, and I realize that the story isn't just about flooding or golf courses. It's about boundaries, intelligence, and the satisfaction of clever, measured response. HOA Karen finally stops pacing and sits down heavily in a chair on her porch. Her clipboard rests on her lap, but it's useless now. No amount of documentation can undo the clever planning, the subtle guidance of water, the mud that now defines her fairways. She's flustered, embarrassed, frustrated, and perhaps most importantly, she's humbled. And I can see, faintly, the realization dawning in her eyes. Control is an illusion, and sometimes small, quiet ingenuity beats rules and threats. I take a moment to breathe in the scene, the sun warming my back, the swamp reflecting the late afternoon light, neighbors whispering, and I feel a sense of calm satisfaction. The story is no longer about anger. It's about precision, creativity, and subtly enforcing boundaries without ever losing composure. I narrate quietly to my phone, voice low and amused. This is suburban justice, measured and clever. No laws broken, no property harmed, but the lesson is unforgettable. There's a rhythm to the aftermath. HOA Karen retreats inside, still muttering, likely planning her next complaint or trying to rationalize the morning away. The neighbors begin to disperse, talking quietly, nodding toward me, some offering approving glances, others shaking their heads in disbelief at what just unfolded. The swamp, the flooded golf course, the workshop, it's all a story now. And as every story in suburbia eventually does, it will be told and retold, embellished, whispered, laughed at, and marveled over. I take a slow walk back to the workshop, checking the water levels, making sure everything is safe, and I realize that the morning has been about far more than flooding or mud. It's about asserting rights, about standing firm when authority overreaches, about creativity over blind compliance. The swamp is temporary, the golf course will recover, but the story and the lesson? They're permanent. And then I think about the humor in it, the absurdity, the theatricality, the perfect irony. HOA Karen, obsessed with control, meticulously regulating her domain, finds herself confronted with a result she did not anticipate, unable to immediately undo it. And the satisfaction isn't mean-spirited. It's a subtle acknowledgement that cleverness, patience, and observation can restore balance without drama or destruction. I glance at the neighbors again, some lingering, some waving quietly, some whispering stories to each other. This is the part of suburban life that is truly memorable, the moments that everyone notices, the absurd dramas elevated by ego and territory. And I realize that this story, while small in scope, embodies universal lessons, patience, intelligence, humor, and the subtle power of measured response. Finally, I step back, surveying the workshop, the swampy fairways, the neighborhood quietly buzzing with whispered commentary, and I smile. The day has been absurd, creative, satisfying, and educational. The flood started as an attack, an attempt at control by HOA Karen. The response was careful, clever, humorous, and highly effective. And in that moment, I feel a profound sense of completion, the balance of power restored, boundaries respected, and everyone, neighbors included, has witnessed a story worth retelling. And yet, there's a lingering question. What next? HOA Karen will undoubtedly regroup, write letters, try to assert authority in some bureaucratic way. Perhaps the golf course staff will devise new drainage. Maybe a small feud will continue in whispers or subtle exchanges. And that's the beauty of it. The story doesn't end. It lingers in imagination, conversation, and debate. It's alive. I turn toward the camera, my phone, or the invisible audience that will hear this story, and I ask quietly but pointedly, if this happened to you, how would you respond? Would you comply, argue endlessly, or get creative? And I let that question hang because there's no right answer, just reflection, discussion, and imagination. And that's the story. A flooded workshop, a cleverly transformed golf course, HOA Karen humbled, neighbors entertained, and the subtle lesson of clever, measured, humorous retaliation standing firm. The wall, the flood, the swamp. It's all part of a story that will live on in whispered conversations, YouTube videos, and backyard chats for months to come. So here's the takeaway. Boundaries matter, creativity matters, patience matters, and sometimes the quietest, smartest, and slightly absurd actions carry the biggest impact. And now I ask you again, what would you have done in my shoes? Comment below. Would you have complied, complained, or done something unexpectedly clever like I did? Because, believe me, in suburbia, every move has consequences, and sometimes the smallest, quietest actions create the biggest stories.